You are standing on a rain-slicked corner in downtown San Francisco. It's 2026 and you're holding a venti oat milk latte. It cost you nearly $8. You remember when $8 bought you a decent lunch. Now it barely buys you a caffeinated afternoon. You look through the window of the Starbucks where you used to answer emails for hours, but the chairs are gone. The third place, that legendary concept popularized by sociologist Ray Oldenburg, where you were supposed to exist between work and home, has been replaced by a barren floor and a mobile order pickup sign. Even more jarring? There's a store closing notice taped to the glass. Now you might think, how is that possible? If Starbucks is charging $7 or $8 for a drink that costs them pennies in beans and water, they must be swimming in cash like Scrooge McDuck, right? Well, here is the cold, hard truth. For the first time in decades, the math of the American city is no longer adding up for the world's most famous Siren. Now we are witnessing the Great Californian Retreat, a tectonic shift where the world's most dominant coffee empire is effectively surrendering the urban centers of the Golden State. It's not because people stopped liking caffeine. It's because the cost of serving that caffeine in a high-density, highly regulated environment has officially crossed the threshold from expensive to impossible. We used to pay for the vibe, the jazz music, the smell of roasted beans, and the reliable Wi-Fi. But today, you're not paying for a vibe. You're paying a survival tax that covers everything from legislative experiments to the soaring costs of urban decay. And the real kicker? Even with those record-high prices, the stores are still bleeding out. California isn't just any market. If it were a sovereign nation, it would be the fifth largest economy in the world, sitting right behind Germany and ahead of India. Starbucks treated this state like its personal playground, erecting a staggering 2,900 stores across its sprawling landscape. For years, California was the crown jewel of the portfolio. But recently, a chilling wind has blown through the corporate offices in Seattle. In Southern California alone, 69 high-profile stores have vanished. This isn't just trimming the fat or a routine quarterly adjustment. Now, this is a canary in the coal mine moment for the entire retail industry. When a company as data-obsessed and operationally efficient as Starbucks starts ripping its roots out of the California soil, it tells us that the urban model, the idea that you can build a profitable business based on high-rent foot traffic and a massive service staff, is fundamentally broken. We are at the end of an era. The Siren is in distress and she's looking for the exit. We aren't just talking about a few closed shops. We are talking about the total dismantling of the urban coffeehouse as a viable economic entity. Now let's talk numbers, the cold, unfeeling kind that keeps CFOs awake at 3 a.m. Yeah, if you want to understand why the Siren is fleeing California, you have to look at a piece of legislation known as AB 1228. On the surface, it sounds like a triumph for the working class. As of April 2024, the minimum wage for fast food workers in California jumped to a flat $20 per hour. It was hailed as a living wage victory, but in the brutal world of retail economics, it acted more like a fiscal guillotine. To understand the magnitude of this, you have to realize that labor isn't just a line item. In the specialty coffee business, it is the heartbeat of the operation. Historically, labor costs for a well-run Starbucks hover around 30% of total revenue. When you hike the floor of that cost by roughly 25% overnight, you aren't just adjusting a budget, you are detonating the entire P&L statement. Let's do the back-of-the-envelope math that corporate headquarters performed. For an average high-volume store in a place like Los Angeles or San Diego, this wage hike translates to an additional $290,000 in labor costs per year per store. Now think about that for a second. That is nearly $300,000 in pure profit that just evaporated into the atmosphere before a single bean was ground. To an economist, this is a classic case of a supply-side shock meeting operating leverage. In simpler terms, Starbucks is a labor-intensive business. Unlike a tech company that can scale to millions of users with a handful of engineers, Starbucks needs human hands to steam milk, pump syrup, and, increasingly, manage the chaotic influx of mobile orders. You can't automate a handcrafted experience without losing the very thing people pay a premium for. Now, the knee-jerk reaction from the public is often, well, they're a multi-billion-dollar company, they can just eat the cost. But capital doesn't work that way. Capital is cowardly. It goes where it is treated best. When the ROI, return on investment of a store, drops below the cost of capital, that store is no longer an asset. It's a liability. Starbucks tried to fight back with the only weapon they had, pricing. If you've noticed your venti latte creeping toward the $7 or even $8 mark, you're seeing price elasticity being tested in real time. Yeah, they raised prices by 50 cents here, a dollar there. But here is the terrifying reality for the board of directors. Those price hikes, as painful as they were for your wallet, only managed to offset about 12% of the increased labor burden. Why only 12%? Because of a concept economists call the point of diminishing returns. Bob, there is a psychological ceiling for what a human being is willing to pay for bean water. At $5, it's a daily habit. At $7, it's a maybe 3 times a week treat. At $9, it's a luxury that competes with a sit-down meal. Starbucks found that if they raised prices enough to fully cover the $290,000 gap, they would lose half their customers to the McDonald's dollar menu or, heaven forbid, the coffee pot in their own kitchen. There's also a deeper, more sarcastic irony at play here. By mandating a $20 minimum wage for fast food workers, California created a massive distortion in the local labor market. But in many parts of the state, a barista now earns more than an entry-level preschool teacher or a junior administrative assistant. This wage compression doesn't just hurt Starbucks. It forces every other industry to hike their wages to compete, fueling a localized inflationary spiral that makes everything from your rent to your car insurance more expensive. But here's the real kicker. Raising wages was supposed to save the middle class and provide dignity of work. Instead, it is effectively deleting the very places where those workers were employed. By making it legally impossible to run a profitable coffee shop in a high-cost urban zone, the state hasn't just raised the floor, it's collapsed the building. If the $20 minimum wage was the lightning bolt that struck the siren, the urban death spiral is the flooding that followed. You see, a Starbucks in a dense city like San Francisco or Los Angeles doesn't operate like a normal business. It operates as a high-volume machine that relies on a very specific type of fuel, the morning commuter. Before the world changed, the math was simple. You pay an astronomical rent, let's say $92 per square foot in downtown San Francisco, because you are guaranteed a literal river of humans flowing past your door between 7 o'clock a.m. and 9 o'clock a.m. In the suburbs, you might only pay $38 per square foot, but you have to work twice as hard to get people to drive to you. For decades, the trade-off was worth it. The city was where the money was. But look at the skyline today. As we sit here in 2026, the ghost of San Francisco is no longer a legend. It's a statistical reality. The office vacancy rate in the city's core has hovered at a staggering 35%. That isn't just a number. It represents hundreds of thousands of missing lattes, missing breakfast sandwiches, and missing quick afternoon pick-me-ups. When the white-collar workforce decided that zooming from the couch was the new hustling in the cubicle, the economic engine of the urban Starbucks simply stalled. The data is brutal. Foot traffic in these downtown locations has plummeted by 38% compared to 2019. And now think like an economist for a second. If your rent is fixed at a premium world-class city rate, but your customer base has shrunk by nearly 40%, and your labor costs have jumped by 25%, you aren't just running a low-margin business, you are running a charity. Every hour those doors stay open, the store is essentially subsidizing the presence of a brand that the neighborhood can no longer support. And then, there is the hidden cost that nobody likes to talk about at cocktail parties: safety and shrinkage. Operating a glass-fronted retail store in a deteriorating urban center has become a liability nightmare. Between the rising rates of retail theft, or shrinkage in corporate speak, and the increasing costs of private security to ensure baristas feel safe coming to work at 5 o'clock a.m., the risk premium of doing business in the city has exploded. When you add up the broken windows, the stolen merchandise, and the skyrocketing insurance premiums, that $92 per square foot rent starts to look more like $150. At some point, the prestige of having a store on a famous corner isn't worth the red ink on the balance sheet. Starbucks realized that the urban model, which was built on the assumption of perpetual density and predictable safety, is a relic of the 20th century. The high-rent, high-labor, high-risk environment of the modern American city has become a trap. Starbucks didn't leave the city because they lost their taste for urban culture. They left because the city, or at least the people with the disposable income and the sense of security, left the city first. They are simply following the trail of crumbs back to the one place where the math still makes sense. Enter Brian Niccol. If you're a follower of corporate turnarounds, that name should ring a bell. He's the man who took Chipotle from an E. coli-riddled PR nightmare and turned it into a high-speed digital ordering juggernaut. When he took the helm at Starbucks, he didn't come to fix the vibe or pick out new jazz playlists. He came to do surgery. He looked at the California map and saw a sea of red ink, and he did something that most CEOs are too terrified to do. He embraced the sunken cost. To pivot away from the urban disaster, Niccol authorized a restructuring plan so massive it sounds like a small country's GDP. We are talking about $850 million, nearly 1.1 trillion Korean won, just to walk away. This money isn't for building new things, it's for breaking old things. It covers the cost of breaking expensive leases in downtown San Francisco and LA, paying out severance, and writing off the assets of stores that simply shouldn't exist anymore. In the world of high finance, this is what we call clearing the deck. It's the admission that the old way is dead, and it's better to pay a billion-dollar divorce settlement now than to stay in a losing marriage for the next decade. So, where is that capital going? It's moving to the suburbs, and it's moving into a very specific format: the drive-thru. Now, if you're a fan of the old-school Starbucks experience, the soft sofas, the smell of newspaper, the J3E Gongan, third place, where you could hide from the world, this is going to sound cold. But Niccol's doctrine is simple. Efficiency is the new ambiance. In a drive-thru model, the economics are night and day compared to an urban cafe. In a suburban drive-thru, you have fewer dead zones where customers just sit and use free electricity for 4 hours on a single $4 coffee. Instead, you have a high-velocity transaction hub. The math is beautiful if you're a shareholder. A drive-thru focused store can operate with a leaner crew because the workflow is linear. It's an assembly line, not a lounge. But this efficiency translates to a 4% increase in operating margins. That might not sound like much to a layperson, but for a company with tens of billions in revenue, a 4% margin expansion is the difference between a stagnating stock and a Wall Street darling. By moving to the suburbs, Starbucks is de-risking its entire portfolio. They are trading the volatile, high-rent, high-regulation jungle of the city for the predictable, car-centric, and lower-tax pastures of the suburbs. They aren't trying to be your living room anymore. They are trying to be a high-tech logistics company that happens to deliver caffeine through a window in under 180 seconds. The third place isn't being renovated, it's being demolished. Long live the drive-through lane. But here's the real kicker. Starbucks isn't the only one fleeing. And they are just the loudest. What we are seeing with Starbucks isn't an isolated incident or a temporary glitch in the matrix. It is the beginning of what I call the retail Great Migration. The Siren isn't walking away alone. She's part of a mass exodus of anchor tenants who have decided that the urban experiment of the early 21st century has reached its expiration date. Look at the boardrooms of Walmart and Target. They've already quietly shuttered or announced the reduction of nearly 10% of their urban portfolios. They've realized the same painful truth that Brian Niccol did. When you combine high shrinkage from theft, astronomical rents, and a regulatory environment that treats every employer like a bottomless piggy bank, the city premium turns into a city penalty. And we are entering a period where our maps are being redrawn. In this new geography, the dense city center is becoming a playground for tourists and the ultra-wealthy, a place of high-end boutiques and destination experiences that can justify the overhead. But for the middle-class commerce that fuels our daily lives, the coffee, the groceries, the quick pharmacy run, the future is suburban. We are heading toward a world where cities are for seeing and being seen, but the suburbs are where the actual high-margin commerce happens. As for Starbucks, it's evolving into something we barely recognize. It's no longer just a coffee shop, it's a tech-driven logistics company. Every new drive-through lane and mobile-only pickup window is a node in a massive caffeine delivery network. They've traded the romance of the bean for the efficiency of the algorithm. And while that might be a tragedy for the urban poet who just wanted a place to sit and write, it is a masterclass in corporate survival. The Siren is moving to the suburbs. She's following the money, the safety, and the car-centric convenience of the 2026 consumer. But as the green lights of the Starbucks logos dim in the windows of downtown San Francisco and Los Angeles, we are left with a haunting question. If the world's most successful retail brand can't afford to be in the city, who can? The third place is vanishing, and the city centers are becoming quieter, darker, and much more expensive. The Siren has left the building. The question is, will the city survive the silence?